Hello everybody, Larry Young here again with another segment of OLaMan Living Life with Purity. And today we need to celebrate the return of the alpha male, or at least the calling up for the alpha male by certain members of our Senate and our politicians in the country right now. And they're calling up for the return of the alpha male because for the last several years, they themselves have been calling for the defeat of the alpha male by trying to raise up the beta male, the Tim Walz, tampon Tim kind of stuff, jazz hands, this is not alpha, this is not leadership material, okay? This is the kind of stuff that you run from. This is the kind of stuff you want to stay the heck away from. But the same people that were calling basically for a coup this last week are now calling for the return of the alpha male because they don't have leadership and they become too feminized. And this kind of call for this military coup is really dangerous because they did not determine if there was a particular order that they needed to abandon or not follow. They just put out this bland statement that was so vague it leaves room for anything to happen. This is what happens when some religious speakers come through, and we had this a couple years ago with a particular priest that a lot of people like. I found to be very troubling and bothersome, and I just think he was wrong to do it. But he stood up in front of a full church there in Rome City and said that he had seen the Antichrist. That's pretty dangerous stuff to tell a bunch of people who are hungry for something, to tell them that you have seen the Antichrist, and then go on to not declare who the Antichrist was that he saw or even what he looked like. So that creates this vague conspiracy, this innocuous boogeyman out there who has been reported as being seen by a person who's supposed to be the credible figure in the room. You see where this is going? It's troubling. It's problematic. There was no Antichrist this guy had seen. He was feeling things. He hadn't seen anything. But he stated that he had seen the Antichrist, but he wouldn't say who it was. And this is what puts a target on everybody's back. It's so vague, it can't be determined, and it leaves the individual who may be solid or not solid to their own conclusions. And they may determine, well, this priest said that, the Antichrist was here. That's him, I can tell. And so you get these troubling message receptors out there, and it's just bad behavior, and we can't be doing this kind of crap. So it happens all over the place. It happens all over the spectrum of different speakers or media right now, things on your devices, TikToks and stuff like that. A lot of stuff is out there that's just complete crap, and we need to be careful about it because it is causing problems. This is what happens when in the schools we've taught our kids not to do critical thinking. We've taught them not to think and to just obey and follow what the rest of the group is doing or what we tell you to think. And when they do that, and then when this particular kid that's been taught not to think, when they act out or they do something that's just crazy, the parents and the authorities ask them, "What were you thinking?" And the kids just look there, "I don't know." Well, they've done that forever, but now it's more true because the kids weren't thinking. They were just reacting and acting out based upon what they were told to believe and to react to. This is where we're at. We don't have critical thinking going on. This is the one thing that guys like Charlie Kirk were bringing back to the educational facilities, and this is what rankled a lot of the educators on these universities, is that what does he think he's doing? Have an open debate. What does he think he's doing bringing in critical thinking ideas to our students? They're going to ruin them. And this is one of the big fears that the universities had, was that oh my God, he's going to actually open debate these children and move their minds. We can't have this. This is not the way that our education is supposed to go, but it's where we're at. So this is a problematic set of thoughts here. So one of the other things that happens out of this, and what happens with people who want to do bad, is many times they want to be known, and they want to be popular, and they want to be in power. And so what they do is many times they will tell the other side what they're going to do and how they're going to do it. It's kind of like the James Bond villain would always tell James Bond, how he was going to, end his, existence here, and this is how it was going to be. He'd go through the whole protocols, how it was going to happen, and then James Bond would figure out a way to get out of it, and you know how it goes. But these guys have to say what they're going to do in order to elevate their power surge. And this is what happened leading up to the October 7th events there, when the terrorists came across the Israeli border and killed 1,200 people and took 200 some hostage. This is all led by a guy named Sinwar. And Sinwar had been in Israeli custody before this. He had been very badly injured, and Jewish doctors, Israeli doctors, fixed him and made him better. And he ended up getting traded back to the Palestinians, the Hamas people, before the October 7th event. He was the guy that actually organized the October 7th event, and he had told the Israelis beforehand what he was going to do, and they still sent him back because of international pressure, Hamas, things like that coming out of Iran and Saudi Arabia and Qatar, the people who were funding Hamas. And this is what happened when Israelis tried to work within the rules of war and engagement, but their enemy, the other side, wasn't. And so I think we have to look for the rules of engagement and civil activities in war are going to be more abandoned as we go forward, because it's been shown that both sides aren't operating by the same sets of values and ideals. And so it's going to have bad results. So, but out of the attacks by Sinwar, and then he ended up in the last year or so in another attack. They targeted him. They got rid of him. But why is it the Iranians and the folks in Qatar and Saudi Arabia aren't being more vocal? Why are they not more full of rage if this is so objectionable to them? Well, one of the reasons is that the people who were dying were Gazans or Palestinians. And so what goes on in these other countries who are supporting these things with Hamas, these other countries don't give a damn about the Gazans or the Palestinians. It's why they wouldn't let any of them come to their countries to seek shelter and to get out of this war zone. Jordan wouldn't even take them. And most of the people in this area are Jordanian. So there's a reason. Even the Arab world, the Muslims themselves, don't have any respect for the Gazans because they see them as being dispensable. They don't care. They never have cared. They've always been the armpit of the Arab world. This has gone back, this is Jesus even, had this at the table when the woman was talking to him at dinner, and the apostles are saying, Lord, remove this dog. We don't need this dog around here. She was a Gazan or a Palestinian, as they want to say. She was considered the dog of the world then. So it hasn't changed. But Jesus saw through that, and he had a lighthearted conversation with her that went over the apostles' heads. But that was Jesus doing his thing. But right now we've got the Arab world is not supporting the lives of these people, they're just cannon fodder. They don't care. They never have cared. It's why they let Hamas put the entries, the 6,000 entries they had into their 350 miles of tunnels. Okay, you've got an 11 square mile area that is called Gaza. It's basically 11 miles by 11 miles. In that area of 11 miles, they've got over 350 miles of underground tunnels with 6,000 entry and exit points. And most of these entry and exit points are in and out from either a hospital area, a private home in a kid's room, schools, mosques, things like this, areas that have been declared to be no-go zones by international law and rule. But it's only being followed by people who are following the rules of international law. And that is not Hamas, that is not Iran, that is not Saudi Arabia, that is not Qatar. They don't care. They never have cared. And why is this? Well, let's go back to 1979. In 1979, I was starting my life in college and at the university, and the Ayatollah Khomeini and his people overthrew the Shah of Iran. And they got rid of him, ran him out, and they were Shia. They were Shia Muslims. And next door in Saudi Arabia, the monarchy were Sunni. So this goes back to the beginnings of Islam, and that it's been very tribal all the way through. It's been it hasn't been cohesive. They've always been at odds with each other for the sake of power, who's in control. It's kind of like a flu vaccine. When you get the flu vaccine, they put in the vaccines for several different variants. It all goes into the flu vaccine, but it's to cover several different types of flu that can happen. And what the scientists or the medical people try to do is they try to concentrate on the several flus that are going to be most prevalent in this season, if you will. They're not going to cover everything. That's why some people may still get the flu, because they didn't have something in to cover this particular type of flu. So the Muslim world, Islam world, is very much like a flu vaccine. It's got all this stuff in there that's doing different jobs and has different ideas about success or how to take down an enemy, all included in the same vaccine or name. And that's the same thing we've got going on with our folks in the Muslim world. They don't all agree. They don't all like each other because they all want each other to submit to them for the sake of power. That's why when you go to like Dearborn, Michigan, it's all being run by one particular group of Muslims who all agree with each other. If you brought in a different group who wasn't, akin to them and wanted to take over power, you'd have fighting in the streets. You would have lots and lots of trouble. And this is why they're very concerned about what could happen in New York City right now, and that's why they got their Muslim police patrols, their own patrols. They're set up. Looks just like cops. They dress like cops, but they're not cops. But it's scaring the shit out of people in New York City. And this is something that's going to have to be dealt with here. But that's kind of taking me off my track. So why are they all about power if they're all supposed to be following the same religion? Because they're not. They're following the same name of a religion, but they all have their own interpretations, and they all have their level of pain that they want to exact and that they will be ready to absorb for the sake of obtaining power. It's always about power. This is why Islam is not, I believe, a true religion, but it's more of a theocracy to try to hold people down. Always has been. I think it may have started out to try to build a religion, but it failed in the face of what was going on with Christianity, who more people saw as an individual's personal struggles in the light of godliness to try to raise themselves up out of this world of sin to move towards, a closer godliness. And I think that was what the Judeo-Christian ethic was doing, whereas the Islamic ethic was about death and destruction and power accumulation. And this is one of the reasons that they don't have any regard for the Gazans. They don't care. They don't care how many die. They hope more die. They're not fans of them either. And so this is all being used in propaganda in our U.S. universities here now too, because you've got these influencers with the money coming out of Qatar and Saudi Arabia and Iran into the U.S. university pools. They've been working very hard, been very successful at teaching students to ask the question when something happens in the world. The students are now reflexively asking, what did we do to cause this? They're always pointing the finger back at the U.S. government, and this U.S. did this. It couldn't have been these people over there because they're all Muslims. Well, the students don't realize that there's a difference in the world because they haven't been taught that. They don't even know what happened in 1979 when they overthrew the Shah of Iran. Now, when they overthrew the Shah of Iran in 1979 and took all those Americans hostage all that time, nearly 2 years, it was over a year and a half. But when they did that, what they did was they scared the shit out of the Saudi Arabians. Because the Saudi Arabians, up until that time, had declared themselves as to being the powerful force, the ones in charge of the holy lands and the holy sites to the Muslim world. But when the Shah of Iran came in, not the Shah of Iran, but the Ayatollah Khomeini came in and took out the Shah of Iran, they came in as the Shias, and they declared that they were the worldwide authority on Islam and the holy sites. And this scared the crap out of the Saudis, because if they didn't put this sort of genie back in the bottle, their heads were next as being the monarchy and ruling class. So they had to suppress this very, very hard in order to protect their butts. So do you see where this is going? Well, this lesson has not been learned and passed on to the students of today. It was obvious to students of my time because we were living through it, and we could see what was happening. We had friends who were Persians, were from Iran, going to school with us, and they could never go back. They had to, get these protective visas to stay in this country, because if they went back, they certainly would have been executed. Very much so, because they were the beholden aristocracy that came out of the Shah of Iran's, pool of people. So the students today are being taught to ask, what did we do to cause this? So it's always the assumption that it's something the West did, and not what the Islamic community did to themselves and has been doing, because they don't follow the storylines, and they don't have the patience to go back that far to understand how these, when the blocking out of the truth has led to these consequences. And part of the problem is a lot of these things that the Muslims have done to each other and are still doing to each other by the disregarding of the Gazans as being invaluable and disposable, is that there's different value systems between the Islamists and the Judeo-Christians. They have totally different values. They are not similar. They are not the same. Their ideas of peace are not the same. Their ideas of prosperity are not the same. Their ideas of power are not the same. And what ends up happening is we end up with all these atrocious things happening in these areas in the Middle East. But our Western brains, our civilized, student Western brains can't see that this could be happening, so they can't even go there to even acknowledge that this is happening. This is how baked they are. And we got to clean things up. We got to thaw some of this stuff out because they have to see it for what it is. It's evil. And it's evil across the board. And what we need to do is realize that and figure out that we have to do something that we haven't been doing. And I think what we need to do is to really get more disciplined and say no. So when the actions happened in Iran in 1979, Saudi Arabia had been moving towards a much more open and what we want to say a Western relationship. Women were not required to wear their burqas. There was much more westernized thinking coming through the Saudi. But as soon as the Saudis saw what was happening with the Shias over in Iran, and the Saudis were Sunnis, so they weren't Shias. They don't like each other. So with the Sunnis, what they had to do very quickly was start rolling back some of these modernization things that have been happening that were westernizing their culture more. And so what they had to do in order to repel this new wave of enthusiasm coming out of Iran, that they had to start shutting things down in Saudi Arabia again. And this caused a lot of problems for friends that I had in classes at Michigan State, some of the Saudis there. They knew they could never go back. So Iran students couldn't go back because they'd be killed. Saudi students couldn't go back because they'd be suppressed. They both turned into theocratic regimes very, very quickly and overnight in a way that diminished any kind of Western interrogations. They didn't want to take questions. And our universities and public opinion people got bought off by all this oil money that was floating through these people. And that's how Qatar then came into the equation. They started using their gross oil receipts. They didn't have any space really to deal with. They're not a big country. So it didn't take much for them to modernize and get themselves up to speed. And then they had all this extra money. So they started pumping all this extra money to buy this influence in the West. And they started throwing money into like Germany, England, United States in particular, because the United States in particular is the biggest benefactor of giving money back over to them. So they were just sort of priming the pump with this money and putting it into the university systems to try to buy their allegiance and to try to get their thought training to come back to this unreal perspective about to not believe what their eyes were seeing. Oh, that's not what you think. That's not what we're doing. This is an old cultural thing. No, it was all bullshit from the beginning. So we need to follow, I think, Alyssa Slotkin's request there for the alpha male brains to come back into the equation. But this is going to be hard because the alpha males have been told to sit down and shut up by the women in their lives all this time. What are the women going to do when the males start, speaking up again, if they were to be so brave? What will the women say? Oh, you've gone too far. You can't do that. That's misogynistic. Well, next time there's a battle or an uprising, I say we send the army of these smart women out there to try to fix it. I don't know if it's going to go too good. So right now, we got war in the streets in some places around the country. People don't want to call it war because that doesn't go with their Western thinking. That's not what it is. War is war. And it can be fought with sticks and stones, or it can be fought with knives and bullets, or it can be fought with bombs and other things. War is war. So we got to put this genie back in the bottle before, we have some real problems out there. So in the meantime, I love you, and I'll be back.